The road stretched ahead like a ribbon of asphalt stitched through a tapestry of ancient trees, their towering forms leaning inward as if whispering secrets to each other in the hush of the forest. The sun had begun its slow descent behind a dense canopy, slanting golden rays through the high branches. It should have been beautiful, serene, even, but instead it felt oppressive. The forest didn't just surround the road. It consumed it. Emma stared out the passenger side window, her eyes tracing the silhouettes of gnarled branches as they clawed against the sky. Her fingers nervously twisted the hem of her sweater, a subtle habit she developed during anxious moments, of which there have been many in recent months. They were supposed to be on a peaceful weekend getaway, just her, Daniel, and their 10-year-old son, Noah. A family retreat, a reset. But something about this place made her chest feel tight, as though she were being slowly compressed by an invisible force. Daniel, behind the wheel, remained focused, jaw tight as he squinted at the road. The GPS had stopped updating 20 minutes ago. Now the screen showed nothing but a spinning icon and the words "searching for signal" in pale gray text. He'd told himself it wasn't a big deal. People got lost all the time in remote areas. It was probably just a patch of bad reception. Still, a voice in the back of his mind, it sounded like his father's, always practical and grim, reminded him that the deeper you went into wilderness, the less you could depend on technology. And if something went wrong, help wouldn't come quickly, if it came at all. In the back seat, Noah sat with his face nearly pressed against the window. He was quiet. Too quiet for a kid who had spent the last few weeks talking nonstop about the trip. "We'll see deer," he'd said. "Maybe bears. Can I bring my binoculars?" He had asked 100 questions about the forest, about what they'd eat, if there were wolves, if he could roast marshmallows. Now he said nothing. His little hands gripped the edges of his booster seat as he watched the trees. "Why does the sky look like that?" he asked suddenly, his voice soft. Emma glanced up. The light was strange. The sun hadn't completely set, but the forest floor was already cloaked in deep shadow. Beams of light cut through the trees in odd angles, like fractured glass, illuminating patches of moss and dirt while leaving others in complete darkness. The air itself seemed thick, almost tinted, as though they'd driven into a place untouched by time. "It's just getting dark," Emma said, forcing a smile. "We'll be at the cabin soon." She wasn't sure that was true. Daniel tapped the screen of the dashboard again, hoping the signal might return, but it remained blank. He'd followed the printed directions as far as he could, but when the signs vanished and the turns grew unclear, he'd trusted the GPS. Now they had neither. "I think we missed the last turn," he muttered. Emma looked at him. "Can we go back?" He didn't answer right away. The road had narrowed steadily over the past few miles. There hadn't been a turnout or intersection since the last gas station, over 40 minutes ago. The trees now pressed so closely to the edge of the pavement that turning around would be nearly impossible without reversing half a mile. "Let's keep going," he said finally. "We'll hit another road soon." Emma didn't argue, but she reached down and turned the heat down. She hadn't realized how hot it had gotten in the car. Or was it just her? They drove in silence for another 10 minutes. The trees grew thicker, the road thinner. Grass and moss crept onto the edges of the asphalt, as if the forest had begun reclaiming it. A heavy silence settled in the car, not the comfortable kind, but the kind that stretches, warps, suffocates. Noah shifted in his seat. "There aren't any animals," he said suddenly. "Shouldn't there be animals?" Emma frowned. He was right. No birds, no squirrels, no rustling. Not even insects buzzing against the windshield. Just the hum of the tires on the uneven road. Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened. A sudden movement in the distance caught Emma's eye. She leaned forward, squinting. "Did you see that?" "See what?" "I thought—" She stopped. There had been a shape darting between two trees. Tall, thin, quick. But maybe it had just been a trick of the light. Her nerves were playing games with her. "I thought it was a deer," she said, her voice unconvincing. Daniel slowed the car slightly, eyes scanning the road. More shadows flickered across the path. Too fast, too shapeless. The headlights, though still on, seemed dimmer than they should have been. And then the sound came. It wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself with a bang or a growl. It was subtle, like a distant tap, tap, tap. Rhythmic, hollow, almost like someone gently drumming their fingers on a wooden table. Daniel looked around. "You hear that?" Emma nodded. It wasn't coming from any one direction. It was everywhere, all around them, soft and slow, like something walking just out of sight, circling them. Noah pressed his face to the window again. "Mom, I think there's someone out there." Daniel slowed the car to a crawl. The tapping stopped. They listened. Nothing. And then, faint but clear, a whisper. Emma's heart skipped. It was just a breath. A single wordless exhale. But it came from the woods, and it was far too close. "Daniel," she said quickly, "drive. Now." He didn't need convincing. The SUV jolted forward as he pressed the gas. The road twisted sharply, and he barely kept him from skidding into a fallen branch. He turned the wheel hard, navigating between tree roots that now pushed through the pavement like veins. Noah began to cry softly in the back seat. "I want to go home." Emma reached back, squeezing his hand. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're okay." But she wasn't sure she believed it anymore. The headlights flickered. The engine made a choking sound. And then it died. The engine gave a final sputtering gasp before silence swallowed the SUV entirely. It was a kind of silence that didn't feel empty, but listening, heavy, thick, too complete, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Daniel tried the ignition again. The dashboard lights blinked. The starter churned once, twice, then nothing. Emma's voice was taut. "What's wrong?" "I don't know." His fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly as he tried to keep his tone steady. "It just died." He leaned forward and stared at the dead road ahead. Trees towered on both sides, their trunks black against the dusky light. The last scraps of sunlight filtered through the branches above, casting shifting shadows across the cracked asphalt. It looked less like a road now and more like a trail that hadn't seen use in years. Emma turned in her seat, scanning the forest behind them. She could barely see anything past the back window. It was too dark now. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, curling toward the vehicle like tendrils. "I don't like this," she whispered. Noah sniffled quietly, trying to stifle his fear. He didn't want his parents to think he was scared, but he was terrified, not just of being stuck, but of the feeling like they weren't alone, like something was watching. Daniel popped the hood. "I'm going to take a look. Probably something simple." Emma grabbed his wrist before he could open the door. "Dan, what if—" He met her eyes. She didn't have to finish the sentence. He was scared too, but he couldn't admit it. He had to be the one to hold everything together. "I'll just check. I'll be right back." Reluctantly, she let go. The door creaked open, and Daniel stepped into the quiet. The crunch of his shoes on gravel sounded far too loud in the stillness. He walked in front of the SUV and propped the hood open. Everything looked fine. No smoke, no loose wires. The battery seemed intact. But when he checked the ignition cables and the fuses, he noticed something strange. A small dry leaf inside the engine block, crumbled and brown. It looked ancient, not just dead, but wrong, like it had decayed too fast. There was another wedge in the air filter and more clumped near the battery, almost as if something had deliberately stuffed them in there. He pulled one out and stared at it. It disintegrated between his fingers into a fine, black dust. Then he heard it again. The tapping. Closer this time. Not rhythmic anymore. Erratic. Scratching. He turned, holding the flashlight. Nothing. Just trees and underbrush. No movement. No animals. But something had moved. He was sure of it. He backed toward the car, slowly. Suddenly, there was a noise, like the sharp intake of breath through clenched teeth. Soft, wet, guttural. Daniel whipped the flashlight around. A face, half seen, just beyond the beam of light, pale and sunken, partially obscured behind a tree trunk. Its eyes were too wide. The mouth hung open as if frozen in mid-scream. Its limbs, what he could see, seemed jointed wrong, like a puppet made by someone who didn't understand anatomy. Then it was gone. He scrambled back into the car and slammed the door. Emma was pale. "What did you see?" He didn't speak at first. He just turned the lock. "All the doors. Lock them. Now." Noah fumbled to hit the button. Emma reached back and pulled him forward into the middle seat, her hands trembling. "What was it?" she asked again, this time barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Daniel said, "but we're not getting out again unless we have to." They sat in the car as the night pressed in. At first, it was just more tapping. Then the faint sound of something brushing against the car, like long fingers dragging across the roof. Then silence. Then, bang. Something hit the back windshield. Noah screamed. Emma turned just in time to see a shadow dart past the rear of the vehicle. Daniel flipped on the high beams. The lights barely cut through the darkness now. It was like the air itself was thick. Fog had begun to seep between the trees, low and dense, curling around the tires of the car like smoke. Something skittered across the road ahead. Fast. Too fast to be human. Emma's eyes were wide. They're getting closer. Daniel took out his phone again. Still no signal. No map. Just that damn spinning icon. He tried to compose himself. "We can't stay here. We need to walk back. If we find higher ground, we might get signal or come across another car." Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let's go together." Quickly, they gathered what little they could. Flashlight, a bottle of water, a lighter, their phones, and stepped out into the cold, still night. As soon as they did, they heard it. A low hum. Not a machine. Not a voice. A sound that seemed to come from the trees themselves. A kind of vibration that settled into the bones. They didn't speak. Just walked. The road behind them disappeared faster than it should have. Swallowed by mist. The flashlight's beam barely reached 10 feet ahead. Every few seconds, Daniel would swing to the sides, but always saw the same. Dense trees, motionless brush, and that strange, clinging fog. And sometimes, faces. Not clear ones. Just impressions. Like smudges in the dark. Eyes that reflected light too well. A mouth that was too wide. A hand pressed flat against bark. The fingers too long. They began to whisper to each other in hushed tones, trying not to alert whatever was out there. The tapping came and went, sometimes from behind, sometimes in front. Once it echoed from above. "Look," Noah pointed. High in the branches above the road, something moved. Daniel raised a flashlight. Dozens of them. Not creatures in the traditional sense. Not animals, but forms. Humanoid in shape, but wrong in every other way. Their skin resembled tree bark, but too pale, gray and knotted, with black veins crawling underneath. Their limbs were twisted, doubled in places, arms bending where they shouldn't. They didn't climb. They clung, perched silently, watching. One of them tilted its head in a slow, unnatural arc. Daniel turned the light off. "What are they?" Emma whispered. "I don't think we're in a normal forest," he said. They walked faster. The tapping followed them. Then, a fork. 2 paths. Both dirt. Both winding into more darkness. "Which way?" Emma asked. Daniel's head spun. Neither looked familiar. There had been no fork on the way in. No signs. No markings. Before he could decide, Noah pointed. "Left." "I saw something. A light." They took the left. As they walked, Daniel realized something unsettling. The air was changing. It was too quiet again. No tapping, no whispers, and no sound of their own footsteps. He looked down. Their feet weren't touching the dirt. They were walking, but the ground was soft beneath them, like moss or ash. With each step, they left no impression. No prints. No disturbance. Emma noticed it too. "Are we even moving?" she whispered. Daniel stopped. Shone the flashlight behind them. Nothing. No road. No trees. Just a thick black wall of fog. They weren't just lost. The forest was shifting around them. Noah started crying again. "Please, I want to go back." "We are going back," Daniel said, gripping his hand. "We just need to find the car." But the car was gone. The road was gone. And Daniel realized something horrifying. The direction didn't matter anymore, because wherever they went, the forest followed. The fog closed around them like a curtain. It wasn't just mist. It was something else. A thick, clinging presence that dimmed the flashlight beam and muffled their breathing. Even their footsteps no longer echoed. Every sound was swallowed by the dense air, as though the forest itself refused to let noise travel. Daniel held the flashlight in one hand, Noah's trembling hand in the other. Emma walked close behind, her fingers occasionally brushing Daniel's back for reassurance. She was trying not to panic, but panic was blooming anyway, tight and cold in her chest. They had been walking for what felt like an hour, or maybe 10 minutes. Time didn't feel normal anymore. There was no moon, no stars, just that shifting haze and endless trees. The deeper they went, the more twisted the trunks became. The bark curled like burnt paper, blackened and scarred, and some of the trees looked melted, or worse, molded, as if someone had made them. "I don't think we're in the same forest anymore," Emma said. Daniel said nothing, but he agreed. He had the growing sensation that the woods weren't just around them. They were watching. Suddenly, Noah stopped. "What is it?" Emma whispered. He pointed through the fog. Something moved. Not directly in front of them. Beside them. Just off the path. Among the trees. The flashlight beam swept left. At first, it looked like part of a tree. The same rough bark. The same mossy edges. But then the shape turned slightly. A face. Sunken eyes. A slitted mouth. Skin that looked more like cracked within flesh. It was crouched, limbs too long, too narrow, like a marionette left tangled in the corner of a stage. It didn't flinch in the light, didn't run. It watched, and then, slowly it opened its mouth, so wide it split up into its cheeks. No sound came out, but Daniel felt it, a hum in his teeth, a crawling in his ears, like pressure inside his skull. He turned off the flashlight. They stood frozen in the dark. When Daniel turned the light back on, just a flicker to check, it was gone. But then they saw more of them, everywhere. At first, they were only impressions. Shadows against bark, shapes that could be tree stumps. But the more they looked, the more they saw. At least a dozen figures crouched or clinging to the trees. Some were partially embedded in the trunks. Others hovered behind low branches. Their faces were smooth and neutral, no emotion. Their heads would tilt or twitch. Sharp, sudden movements, as if someone was flipping a switch. One of them crawled. Not walked, but crawled down a tree trunk headfirst and stopped just feet from the path. It didn't move again. "What do we do?" Emma whispered. "We don't stop," Daniel said. "We just keep going. Don't look at them. Don't run." Noah clutched Daniel's hand tighter. They pressed on. But the forest had changed again. The path curved strangely, looping back and forth, and the trees on either side started to look the same. Identical knots, identical gashes in the bark, the same twisted root protruding into the trail. Daniel paused. "We passed that tree already." Emma shook her head. "You're sure?" "Yes." He pointed. "That broken branch. That knot. We're going in circles." "Then we're trapped." Emma's voice broke. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. No, listen. Maybe we're close to something. These things, wherever they are, they're watching, not attacking." "Yet," she whispered. They stopped talking after that. The fog lifted slightly. The forest opened into a clearing. At the center of it stood a structure, old, wooden, sagging under the weight of time. It looked like a ranger station. Or maybe a hunting shack. The door hung crooked on its hinges, one shutter swinging lazily in a breeze that didn't touch the trees. Daniel hesitated. "We shouldn't go in," Emma said. "Do we have a choice?" There was no other path, just trees, and the quiet, patient watchers all around them. The family approached the shack cautiously. Every step made the floor beneath them feel less like forest and more like sponge. Daniel stepped onto the porch. The wood creaked, but held. He pushed the door open. The inside smelled of rot and mildew. The walls were warped with moisture. An old table stood in the corner, half collapsed. A few broken chairs. A rusted oil lantern. Scratches lined inside of the door. Deep, erratic gouges that ran from the floor almost to the ceiling. Claw marks. Emma stayed just outside the doorway. Noah behind her. Daniel moved deeper inside. There was no furniture besides a broken table. No signs of a radio or a map or even signs that anyone had used this place in years, except for the scratches. And the smell. He swept the flashlight across the ceiling, then froze. In the rafters, something shifted. A pale shape, tucked into the corner like a spider, limbs bent backward at the joints. Its head was upside down, craning at an unnatural angle to look at him. It blinked slowly. Daniel backed away. "Emma," he said tightly, "don't come in." But it was too late. Emma had stepped over the threshold. The thing in the rafters dropped. It didn't fall. It lowered itself, unfolding limb by limb like it had no bones. It landed softly, soundlessly, on the floor, just feet from Emma. She screamed. Daniel threw the flashlight beam onto it fully. The thing flinched and hissed. The sound was like steam forced through a pipe, shrill, thin, unnatural. It backed into the shadows and vanished into the far corner of a shack. Another sound now. From outside, dozens of them. The family turned to the windows. Figures, everywhere, climbing trees, crawling along the ground, dragging themselves out from behind stumps and rocks. One was perched directly outside the window, peering in through a hole in the boards. Its hand reached through, long fingers tapping the glass in slow, deliberate patterns. Tap, tap, tap. Noah was crying again. Emma held him close. Daniel grabbed a chair and shoved it under the doorknob. The tapping became louder, faster. The roof above them groaned. "They're on top," Emma whispered. Daniel looked up. The ceiling bowed inward slightly, as if something heavy was crawling across it. He turned to Emma. "We need to run. Now." She nodded. He kicked the door open. For a moment, just a breath. The clearing was empty. Then the shadows moved. Shapes emerged from the mist, long-limbed, hunched, twisted, not sprinting, but approaching. Their movement slow, deliberate, but constant, always advancing. No hesitation. Daniel held the flashlight in one hand like a weapon. He waved it back and forth. Whenever the beam touched one of the creatures, they froze. Not permanently, but like deer caught in headlights. They didn't seem to like the light. He kept it trained on them. Run around them. Stay in the beam. They ran. Daniel led, sweeping the light across the clearing in arcs, forcing the creatures to halt or shy away. One reached for Emma, its fingers inches from her face, but she ducked and kept moving. They made it to the far side of clearing, back into the trees, back into the mist. But something had changed. The path here was different. It was dirt now, compact and curved slightly downward, as if leading into a basin. Daniel hesitated. But behind them, the shrieks began. Not human, not animal. Somewhere in between. He didn't wait. They ran. Underscore, 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 underscore. At the bottom of the path, the forest opened again, but this time into something completely unexpected. A field, flat, overgrown, covered in tall grass and strange black flowers that gave off a faint glow. The moon had risen, full, pale, distant, and the fog had lifted just enough to show the horizon. At the far edge of the field, a fence, metal, modern, and behind it, road. Real road, blacktop. They sprinted. The creatures didn't follow them into the field. They lined the trees, watching from the edge, unmoving. Daniel didn't look back. They climbed the fence, fell to the other side. The road felt real under their feet. Hard, unyielding, safe. A moment later, headlights appeared in the distance. A truck. Someone had found them. The truck came to a screeching halt as Daniel stumbled onto the pavement, waving both arms like a desperate castaway spotting a rescue ship. The engine idled heavily as the headlights cut across the family, dusty, bruised, and wide-eyed with terror. The driver stepped out slowly, warily. "You folks all right?" he asked. His voice was calm, southern, tinged with suspicion and concern. He wore a faded orange vest and had a shotgun mounted behind his truck seat. Daniel nodded, gasping. "There's something in the woods. We need to get out of here now." The man eyed the tree line. "Lot of stories about those woods," he said. "People talk about lights, shapes, screams. You're lucky to come out." Emma clutched Noah tightly. Her eyes never left the forest. The man opened the door. "Get in." They didn't need telling twice. The family climbed into the back seat. Daniel slammed the door and locked it automatically. As the truck pulled away, Emma looked back. Nothing moved, but the watchers were still there, standing just inside the tree line, their shapes barely visible, like shadows that refused to fade. One of them lifted its arm slowly and pressed a long finger to where its mouth should be, a shushing motion. Then it stepped back, vanishing behind the trees. The fog closed again. They drove in silence for 10 full minutes. The road curved and straightened, now smooth and freshly paved. Civilization returned little by little. A rusted mile marker, an old sign pointing toward a highway, a flickering power line overhead. Finally, they passed a billboard for a diner. "Breakfast served all night," it read. The truck turned into a gravel lot. The diner was brightly lit, neon signs buzzing. Inside, the warmth and chatter of a night crew greeted them. A waitress poured coffee behind the counter. A bored-looking man in a flannel shirt read a newspaper in the booth. But the moment the family stepped inside, the air shifted. Everything felt wrong. It was too bright, too clean. The music on the old jukebox played a warped, scratchy tune that seemed familiar, but slowed down. The waitress looked up. She had no expression. Her eyes were just a little too wide. The man in flannel never turned a page. Daniel's heart sank. This was wrong. The truck driver walked past him to the counter, 3 off the trail, picked him up outside Hollow Pine. The waitress nodded slowly. "Been a while." Noah whispered, "Daddy, I don't think we left." Daniel grabbed his wife's arm. "We're leaving. Now." They turned for the door. The driver was already there, blocking the exit. "I wouldn't do that," he said softly. "It's better in here. They don't like when people try to go back." Emma backed up. "What is this?" The lights flickered. Outside the windows, the fog was back, but the trees weren't, just endless white mist. Noah clutched his mother's leg. "The road's gone." The waitress finally spoke. "You walked too far, past the edge. Ain't a road back now, not unless they let you out." Daniel shoved past the driver, slamming into the door. It didn't open. He hit it again. It didn't budge. "Let us out," he shouted. The other man in the diner, the one in flannel, folded his newspaper. He hadn't turned a single page in the last 15 minutes. Now he stood up, and he wasn't human. His face split vertically down the middle like a curtain. No blood, just shadow. Inside his chest was an empty cavity, a void that stretched deeper than it should, as if he were a suit, something worn. Daniel stumbled backward. Emma screamed. Noah cried. "We're still in the forest." The lights exploded. The walls of the diner peeled back. And suddenly, they were no longer inside. They stood in the center of the forest, clearing again. The same bent trees, the same black flowers. But now it was full of them. Hundreds of creatures, standing, watching, no longer hiding in the trees. Each one still, breathless, as if waiting for a signal. Daniel turned to run, but the clearing had no exit. Emma fell to her knees. "We never left. We never left." Noah screamed, pointing upward. Above them, the trees had grown together, formed a dome, a ceiling of roots and wood, sealing them in like an insect under glass. Then, The hum began again, low, vibrating. In their skulls, their bones, their teeth, the watchers began to move, not running, not charging. They walked, slowly. They circled, closer. Daniel picked up a broken branch, held it like a sword. "Stay back," he warned. But they didn't listen. One creature stepped forward. It was taller than the others, older. The bark-like skin hung in strips from its frame. Its eyes were hollow, glowing faintly. Its face open, not a mouth, but a spiral of teeth that seemed to go inward forever. Daniel swung the branch. The creature caught it effortlessly. Then it leaned forward, placing a single hand on Daniel's forehead. The world twisted. He was standing in his car again, engine humming, Emma beside him, Noah in the back seat, humming a tune, drawing on the window with his finger. The forest looked normal, quiet, late afternoon light, spilling through the branches. Daniel blinked. "What?" Emma turned to him. "What is it? Weren't we?" But he couldn't remember what he was going to say. Noah said, "I hope we see a deer." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe we will." He turned on the radio. It worked. The GPS reconnected. The road ahead looked clear. Just trees. Just quiet. He took a breath and drove on. For the rest of the drive, the family said very little. Daniel focused on the road, hands steady on the wheel. Emma sat quietly beside him, eyes fixed out the window, blinking as though waking from a dream. In the back seat, Noah resumed humming, softly, rhythmically, like a tune from a lullaby, but just slightly off. A note too low here, a breath too long there. The GPS on the dashboard buzzed back to life. Turn left in 500 feet. Daniel followed its direction, without question. The road curved gently through the trees, wider now, less claustrophobic. There were no more shadows leaping between the trunks, no tapping, no fog, just the occasional gust of wind, sending leaves scattering across the blacktop. But there was a silence in the air that wasn't natural. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the presence of something beneath it, a tension, a breath that never exhaled. Half an hour later, they emerged onto a main highway. Traffic passed like normal. Cars, motorcycles, a semi-truck honking at a slow driver. Civilization. Daniel almost cried. He pulled over at a rest stop to breathe. There were vending machines, a map board, a row of parked vehicles, and an older man with a cigarette standing beside a motorcycle. Normal things. Daniel got out and stretched, letting the air cool his face. Emma stepped out too, wrapping her arms around herself. He looked at her. "You remember it, right?" She hesitated. "Yes," she said finally, "but I don't know how." Daniel looked back toward the forest. It loomed behind the rest area, calm, almost inviting, like a sleeping dog waiting for someone to step too close. He turned to the man by the motorcycle. "Excuse me, what's that forest called?" The man squinted toward the trees. "That one? Hollow pine." Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. I thought that area was off limits." The man shrugged. "Should be. Lot of strange stories. People go in. Not all of them come out." He took another drag. "You look like someone who came back." Daniel didn't respond. They continued their trip, as if everything were normal. Reached their cabin. Checked in. Smiled at the receptionist. She gave them brochures and maps and said, "We hope you enjoy your stay." Like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. That night, Noah refused to sleep alone. Emma lay beside him, humming the same strange tune he had earlier. Her eyes remained open, even in the dark. Daniel sat outside the cabin, staring up at the stars, trying to make sense of it. Every time he tried to recall what happened in the clearing, his thoughts scattered. The images flickered like static. He remembered the spiral mouth, the watchers, the feeling of falling through himself. But it was like remembering a nightmare, clear in emotion, foggy in detail. Still, he couldn't stop wondering. Why had they been let go? And then came the dreams. It started with a knock, just after midnight. A slow, deliberate knock on the window beside the cabin's porch. Daniel had dozed off in a chair, half wrapped in a blanket. The sound woke him immediately. He turned. No one was there. He waited, heart pounding. Another knock, now at the opposite window. Behind him, he stood, flashlight in hand, and swept across the trees. Nothing. But in the morning, they found footprints. Not human. Long, spindly. Bare. 6 toes. And too many of them. Noah pointed them out first. They were looking in the windows. Emma stared at the forest edge. We didn't leave. Daniel felt it too. They'd escaped, yes, but they hadn't truly returned. They'd brought something back. Back home. Weeks later, things didn't go back to normal. The house felt different. Colder, even in summer. Noah stopped sleeping through the night. He'd wake up crying, telling them about the tall ones on the walls or the watchers in the backyard. At first, they chalked it up to trauma, something he'd forget with time. But Emma started seeing them too. Reflections that didn't match her movement. Shadows standing in doorways that disappeared when the lights flicked on. Once, she found the hallway rug turned upside down. A series of strange scratches marked the floorboard beneath, like something had crawled across them. Daniel began researching. He found obscure forums, deep web places, threads without titles, stories from hikers, campers, rescue workers, all describing similar things. I saw a face in the tree that looked like mine. I walked in circles for hours and found my own footprints, but I'd never pass that way. Something followed me home. I haven't slept in days. Many referenced hollow pine. Others didn't name a location at all, but the patterns were unmistakable. Daniel posted a question anonymously. Has anyone ever left the forest but felt like it followed you back? The only reply was a single sentence. It doesn't let go. It just waits until you forget you're still inside. That night, Daniel woke up to a whisper. It came from the baby monitor in Noah's room. A low, static-laced voice. Not Noah, not Emma, just a whisper. You never left. He rushed into the room. Noah was asleep, but the window was wide open, and on the floor, tracing faint black ash, was a spiral, just like the one he'd seen on the creature's face. In the following days, Daniel changed. He stopped going to work, pulled the curtains shut, nailed them down, covered mirrors, disconnected the Wi-Fi. Emma begged him to see a doctor. He didn't listen. Every time he looked out the window, he saw them, figures, far off, between trees, on rooftops, under lamplight, just standing, watching, waiting. One morning, Emma found Daniel in the backyard, barefoot, eyes blank, hands covered in dirt. He had dug a deep, perfect circle in the grass. He didn't remember doing it. Noah stopped talking altogether. He just stared at corners now. Then came the last night. Daniel woke up to silence. Not just quiet, but absence. He sat up. Emma was gone. So was Noah. He stood and walked through the dark house. No lights, no hum of appliances, just empty air. He reached the hallway and saw it. The spiral, carved into the floor, leading to the front door, which was open. Outside, the forest had returned. Not just trees. The forest, fog, twisted bark, watchers. He stepped outside and walked. They were waiting for him. Emma, Noah, the creatures, all standing around the clearing. Not angry, not welcoming, just present, just still. And Daniel finally understood. He hadn't escaped. Not really. He'd been released, given a glimpse of freedom. But the moment he remembered, the moment he believed it had been real, he'd reopen the door, let them back in. The forest is patient. It doesn't take everyone, just those who see it for what it really is. A place that isn't place. A thing that isn't just trees and fog and shadows. It's alive, and when it chooses you, it watches, follows, waits, until you remember it, and then it brings you home.